Welcome to the Growth Through Adversity podcast, where men are forged, not coddled. Here we dive deep into the path of true transformation in pursuit of physical, mental, spiritual, and temporal growth. We talk training, nutrition, business, mindset, and spirituality. We embrace strength and we loathe ease. We reject weakness in every form and cultivate power, the will to power itself. This is the rebirth of modern man. Raw masculinity, tempered by reason, virtue, and right action, because nothing of value is earned without sacrifice. Let's begin our apotheosis together. Welcome to another episode of the Growth Through Adversity podcast with your host, Ragnar the Warwolf. What is happening, people? So today we are going to go over something really fun, and we're going to rank 5 very common fitness trends. So these are things that probably most of you will have been familiar with at one time or another, and I'm going to let you know if there's any validity to them, and if so, how much. So there's so many trends out there, and it's something I hear all the time when I get on calls with prospective new clients, and it's like, man, I just don't know what the fuck to do. You know, one guy says do this, another guy says do that, and you know, sometimes they're both right, sometimes one of them's wrong, the other one's right. But there's these really common fads and trends that we see in the fitness industry. So today I'm just going to go through 5 of them, and I'm going to let you know which ones are legit and which ones aren't, and I'm going to rank them worst to best. So what happens when we follow trends blindly is we end up chasing fads instead of principles. So everything I do related to fitness is grounded in fitness principles, right? And what I mean by that is that they're principles that have been proven, researched, or have so much anecdotal research behind them, and so much anecdotal proof behind them that you just know that they're legit and you just know that they're real. Whereas these fads pop up and they're new and they're shiny and people love new and shiny things and they're promoted and marketed as a shortcut, and people fucking love shortcuts, especially when it comes to fitness. And, you know, like I said, some of them end up being the next best thing. Most of them are bullshit. But what I see a lot with these fads, especially when it comes to diets, is that it causes this loop of starting and then stopping and then starting over again, because it's frustrating when you start something and, you know, maybe it works for a little bit and then it stops working. You don't understand the principles. Again, there's that word again, principles of why it worked in the first place. And so you don't know how to calibrate it or fix it. And people lose motivation, they burn out, and they just end up quitting. So what we really want to do is we want to train based on principles, right? We want to train based on underlying principles that we know work and have been proven to work, and we want to trust those, right? So we want to eat in a way, train in a way, and perform in a way that it has, like I said, is grounded in solid governing principles. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. And that's how I'm going to rate these as to whether they're legit or they're not legit. So I'm a big fan of not chasing trends, and again, working on a program that is grounded in structure and principles that actually produce results. So without further ado, let's hop into this. And so, like, the principles that I like to follow is that we want efficiency, right? So we're all at a stage in our lives, myself included, where we're not 22-year-olds with no responsibility that can spend 2 hours a day, 2 hours a day, 6 days a week in the gym, right? So we want to train efficiently, right? And the other downside of that is that it's not necessarily effective, right? So you end up breaking more stuff down than you're able to rebuild, especially as our body ages and our hormonal profiles change. So we want to train very efficiently. We want to work really hard, but we also want to work really smart. So train less to get better results, get more results, right? So again, I say it every time we have one of these: more is not better, better is better. So we don't only want to train hard, we want to train better. Number 2, we want to eat to perform. We want to eat for fuel, and we want to eat for performance. So that cuts out a lot of the noise. And we want to eat the foods that are going to move the needle. They're going to help us perform. They're going to help us stay really healthy. And I think the key there is really healthy. So I frequently hear from clients and help them with their blood work and go through their blood work. And almost 100% of people that actually apply themselves to the program, we see an improvement in their blood work, right? And, you know, this is like literally across the board, and most of them go from pretty scary bad blood work to oftentimes very good blood work. So we fix a lot of the metabolic conditions and underlying like precursors to heart issues and cardiovascular issues simply by eating well, training well. And when you think of it in that frame, it becomes less of like a punishment to eat well and more of like a privilege because you're buying yourself more time. And on top of that, you're buying yourself better time. It's going to be, it's going to pay itself in dividends when there's, 60, 70, 80, 90 even, you're not riven with disease and riven with medical conditions and on a handful of medication. And you're sacrificing a little bit now of some of the junk foods that you like to buy you a lot more time back in the future and a lot better time back in the future. And that's 100% how I look at it. And then we also want to recover. So we want to focus heavily on recovery, especially as we get older, because our body recovers a lot slower and it's a lot less forgiving, right? Injuries take longer to recover from, if ever. So we want to really emphasize recovery in this process as well. So those are kind of the principles I look at when we build programs. And so let's go through and rate the fads. All right. So number one, the absolute fucking worst, dumbest shit I've ever seen. Carnivore diet. The reason why it's the dumbest shit I've ever seen, and I will be merciless against the carnivore diet, and it pisses a lot of people off when I do it on Instagram. But as far from everything that I have seen, it's just highly ineffective. Eliminating carbs, what it does to you is it kills your performance in the gym, right? They can argue that to their face till it's blue, but performance in the gym, all activity existing over about 70% intensity. So that's weightlifting, that's sprinting, that's even standing up from a chair, anything that requires a lot of effort on your part. It is preferred source of fuel is muscular glycogen or glycogen in your liver, right? So cellular fuel that comes from carbohydrates, right? So depleting glycogen on top of the myriad other like possibly serious health effects that can have downstream does is it puts your body in a highly stressed state. It elevates cortisol levels and it destroys your intensity. It destroys your ability to train intensely. And so you take a little bit of short-term gain of like you're going to lose weight faster because you're not eating anything. You cut out the biggest food group where the majority of your calories come from. So of course you're going to lose weight faster. You're in a massive caloric deficit. In fact, you're in such a huge caloric deficit that it's usually going to prove deleterious later on because it's going to slow your metabolism down to such a point where you're not even able to lose weight, even though you're only eating 1,200 calories a day, which is not ideal. Now, there are some cases where possibly a carnivore diet could be effective, and it's never going to be for someone who's training and lifting and has any type of intensity demand or psychological demand for work. It's the other thing, your brain prefers to run on glucose. So generally the carnivore is going to slow down your performance at work, your ability to critically think, your response time, all kinds of like things that can be very critical depending on your job. Very critical depending on your job for some of like my first responders and military guys in the group. But yeah, so it's not a great choice for anybody that falls in those massive categories that make up probably 90% of the population. Who it could possibly be good for, and we'll go into this a little bit later, a little bit more. People that are completely sedentary and morbidly obese. So if like you literally don't do anything, you're retired, you sit at home all day, and you're morbidly obese, and so your activity level is very low, and you want to find a way to lose weight. Again, I don't think it's the best way, but it's probably not going to hurt you too much because you don't have any real demand for high threshold energy. And then people with certain autoimmune conditions, and I'm not going to super go into that here because that's very controversial and very not well researched, but there has been some interesting data there that it could possibly be beneficial in some very rare cases. So carnivore diet, absolute worst. Number 4, bad. The second worst, the bro split. So for those of you who don't know what the bro split is, it was a very common exercise modality back in like the Arnold days, the golden era of bodybuilding. And it's a 5-day split. So, and where you work one muscle group each day. So chest, back, legs, arms, shoulders. And the problem with that is that it eats up 5 or 6 days of your week. Which is it's not optimal, it's not efficient, and it's not necessary. B, it crams too much volume on one muscle group, so it treats all muscle groups the same. You're training the legs and basically the biceps, triceps the same, right? And so the legs have much more muscle fibers, much more mass. I mean, the glute is the biggest muscle on your body. The group of quads is the biggest muscle group on your body. So, and those are both on your legs. So, treating those with the same amount of volume and the same amount of training as you're going to treat like the little tiny muscle in your bicep here is ridiculous. And then it decreases frequency. So, you're only training one muscle group a week. So, if shit gets busy at work, something comes up, you miss one group or you miss one workout, you've missed that entire muscle group for the week, and you can't make it up because you're fucking lifting 6 days a week, and you already don't have enough rest. So you got to have at least a day or two off there. So it's ineffective and inefficient in many different ways. And then probably primarily frequency. So frequency is how often you train a muscle group, and more research has emerged over the last 10 to 15 years showing that greater frequency produces greater results, right? So the more you train a muscle, the more it grows. It seems very obvious, but that research has also shown that. People used to argue this. And it spreads your volume out more intelligently through the week. So you work your muscles one day, you have a couple days rest, you work those muscle groups again, have a couple days rest. So you're getting 2 to 3 times frequency on each muscle group and spreading the volume out over the week. So you're able to get more intense sets and work harder and actually get more stimulus on the muscle. So again, bro split, I think, is probably literally the worst split, the dumbest way to train, in my opinion. All right, so flexible dieting. So this one I'm a little bit torn on. I honestly think its intentions are sincere, and I think there is some value to it, but I think it has a lot of shortfalls that I'm not a huge fan of. So that's why I don't really teach it. I don't talk about it too much. So the idea of flexible dieting is very simple. It's just if it fits your calories, right? Or I'm sorry, if it fits your macros, but really if it fits your calories. And the idea there is that it's going to teach you caloric awareness, and it's going to give you a lot of freedom, right? It's going to create a lot of freedom by knowing your macros and just making sure that you fit your daily meals into those macros, right? So, like I said, idealistically, I think it's fantastic. But the way execution, it begins to fall apart, right? Another good thing about it is it's supposed to prevent extreme restriction. So you're not heavily restricting yourself to lose weight. You're more flexibly dieting. You're just making sure you hit your calories, macros every day. Doesn't matter where those calories, macros come from. That's kind of like the clarion call of flexible dieting. It doesn't matter what you eat. It just matters how much you eat. True to an extent when it comes to weight loss, weight gain. False when it comes to overall health and longevity. And that's where I think this falls apart. So the reality of how people execute flexible dieting is they use it as an excuse to eat the fuck out of a ton of junk food, right? Because it fits their macros. This is going to create poor health and hormonal function. Just if you're eating, the mass majority is coming from junk food, your hormonal profile is going to be dog shit. Your microbiome is going to be dog shit. And that's ultimately going to lead to health issues down the road. And freedom without discipline is chaos. The other thing with flexible dieting is with how they argue it doesn't work, because ultimately at the end of the day, if you really just eat what you want to eat and you eat a bunch of junk food every day, sure, you might fit into your calories, but you're not going to fit into your macros. You're not going to get 1 gram per pound of lean body mass of protein eating McDonald's and shit like this. It's not going to happen, right? And then you're not going to get adequate carbohydrates, and you're going to go way over on your fats. So you're going to be way high on fats, somewhere in there in carbohydrates, and low on protein, right? So it's going to be kind of like almost the reverse curve that we want to see in your macros when you really apply this. And then the only way to counteract that is to, like, basically get all your protein exclusively from protein shakes. Then you're missing components of digestion. And it's just not ideal in so many ways. Now, there is a time for like a flexible dining system if you're traveling, if you don't have as much control over what you're eating on a daily basis. It can be useful. So understanding the underlying principles of it, I don't think is bad. But, the whole idea there, like my approach to flexible dieting is I still want to eat 80 to 90% whole foods, lean proteins, complex carbohydrates, and healthy fats in a system of like simple and repeatable nutrition, right? So that's something that can work for you while you're traveling. And I would almost anchor it backwards. So I would use protein anchoring. I would focus on number one, getting my protein goal every day, and then filling in the rest of my calories with, I guess, whatever I want to an extent. That would be a more healthy way to flexible diet for a short time. Again, I wouldn't do it long term because the problem here is that if we're not, the other problem here is micronutrient profile. So if you're not eating the right fruits, the right vegetables, the right meats, you know what I mean, the right carbohydrates, slowly over time, you're going to deplete your micronutrients. And that's going to cause a slew of issues downstream. So much better to follow a good, regimented, structured nutritional program that's based on a whole diet, a well balanced, whole food based diet. Okay, so let's talk about the good ones here. So, number two, great training 3 to 4 days a week. This has taken off in became more and more popular on social media all around. You see a lot of people kind of trending towards this. The research is also trending in this direction. So, and when we talk about training, it doesn't mean being active. That's something I think people fuck up on this. If you lift 3 days a week and then you don't do anything for the other four, you're still not going to be optimal. But what you can do is you can get 10K steps, 5, 6 days a week, and you can lift weights 3 days a week. And I think that is a super good sweet spot that's perfect for people aged in that like 40 to 65 range where they're busy, their recovery slowed down, their joints are a little more beat up. You can only handle so much weightlifting every week. It's sustainable. You can have really high intensity, great workouts paired with adequate recovery and consistency wise. It's easy to maintain long term. I think it's ridiculous when people tell me they can't commit to 3 days of training a week at less than an hour per session. It's 3 hours a fucking week out of all the hours in a week. Like that's a time management problem, not a you don't have time problem. That's a you don't manage your time well problem. 100%. Now asking people to train twice a day, 6 days a week, sure, they don't have time for that. I believe that. Asking them to train 2 hours a day, 4 or 5 days a week, again, they probably don't have time for that. But you can find 40 minutes a week, 3 times a week, and that's really all you need to go to the gym for lifting, as long as you're active outside of that. And that is the key. And so, number one, absolute king is low volume, high intensity training. So, Metzner was talking about this back in the 80s. Nobody believed him, although he built a superb physique on it. And then the research started catching up with it. And so, fewer sets at a much higher effort produces infinitely more stimulus on the muscle than a lot of garbage sets at a lower effort, right? So, muscle growth occurs through mechanical tension, right? That's the main driving force of muscle growth. Mechanical tension damages the muscles, gives them stimulus, creates a super anabolic environment in the muscles, gives them stimulus to grow. Protein synthesis happens, the muscles grow over time, right? So mechanical tension is driven largely by intensity, how heavy the weight you're lifting is, how the proximity to failure that you're taking that lift. And that's what's really going to produce it, not a ton of fucking junk volume where you're just going in there, you feel exhausted, you're really sore. A lot of people watch that as like their main metric. Soreness is a metric, but it's not really the most effective metric. The most effective metric is that you're getting stronger every week and that your body's changing over time. You don't necessarily have to ever get sore for that to happen, right? As ironic as that sounds. Um, and junk volume and then just like efficiency. So you're not wasting any time. These workouts are legitimately, you can get a great workout in 45 minutes. So yeah, I think it is not only the most effective way to train, it's also the most efficient way to train. And if you can pair those two pillars together, you absolutely can't miss. So my final ranking here based on the principles we went over. Number one, the best low volume, high intensity training. 3 to 4 days a week is great. That's how many times a week you should be training. For an average kind of middle range here, I think flexible dieting has a place. It's worth learning. I wouldn't make it my primary nutritional system for the reasons outlined here. And then for the worst, bro splits and the carnivore diet. complete waste of time and probably inherently just unhealthy and bad for you. So, again, we want to focus on principles. We're not chasing trends. We're following systems that work, that actually work, so that we can train less, recover better, and grow. And that is all I have got for you guys today. But I'm going to go ahead and stop this share, and I'm going to open up the table to any questions. I'm going to start with, yep. So Chantel commented, carnivore diet equals heart attack. I completely agree with her. The carnivore people will argue that till your face is blue, based on YouTube videos circulating about it. But yeah, I mean that's what the data says. So high LDL cholesterol, low HDL cholesterol, paired with inflammation is what leads to heart disease, stroke, heart attacks. All of those become exponentially higher when we're eating a diet rich in animal fats and not balancing it out with, the things that are going to reduce the inflammation in our dietary and cardiovascular system, like fiber, fruits, vegetables. Chansey, I tend to flex diet, but watch the quality of food I eat. Yeah, I think you have it down, because you're so limited on the amount of food that you can eat, that you like, from what I've seen, you actually like do the flexible diet how it's supposed to be done. And that's why I said I don't think it should be discounted. I think there's definitely quality to it, as long as you perform it correctly, where you're eating high quality foods, you're focusing on getting enough protein, you know what I mean? And you're not just like cramming in 2,000 calories of junk food and saying, "Hey, I'm flexible dieting. I hit my macros," because like you didn't. You just ate a bunch of shit. So yeah, like I said, that was why we ranked that in the middle there. I think it's got a place. I just think it's got too high of a propensity to abuse it, to teach beginners that as like a valid nutritional system. But you've been doing it for a very long time, and it works really well for you. Any other questions? You guys can unmute yourself if you have them. I'll hang out here for a couple of minutes. If you don't, no worries. I just always like to give you guys an opportunity for a couple Q&As here. Doesn't have to be about what we talked about tonight either. It can be literally about anything. And then also, I'm going to do another one of these tomorrow, probably roughly the same time. This was yesterday's. We got caught up on some craziness yesterday, but I want to make sure you guys get two of them. And I am also going to get the calendar out today for kind of like the plan for the month. And if you guys ever have ideas that you want to learn about in like one of these lives, drop them in the group chat or in the Facebook group, and tag me, because like I do these for you guys. So if there's stuff specifically you want to learn about, I'm always open to ideas. My brain is overwhelmed trying to come up with ideas for content. It seems to be the only thing I do in my life anymore. But yeah, so I'm always open, receptive to ideas. So if there's stuff that you're like, fuck, I'm really curious about this, really wish Ragnar would do a live on it, just don't hesitate to ask me, and I will definitely get it on the calendar.
Have you done one of a training through injuries?
I have, but I can always do another one. I think that's something we should revisit about every 6 months or so.
Okay.
I'll add it.
And like the correlation between that and PT,
Yep. Kind of bridging the gap between
Yep.
injuries and PT and strength building and like long-term recovery through resistance training. Totally.
Yep. And doing them like together. Like I found a lot of relief in the fact that like the PT and the weight training together worked to get
Yeah.
the injury to
Yes.
where, I could train harder and better. So
Absolutely. Yeah, no, there's a synergy between it. Like PT is really good for regaining mobility and getting you through those first like steps of recovery, or like post surgery. But honestly, then they kick you loose. And a lot of people just are like, cool, I'm done with my PT, I'm good. But that's really like where the actual like regaining full function and strength actually begins. And if you never finish that process, then that's always going to be a very vulnerable
no,
joint. You're probably just going to end up re-injuring it.
and my PT, my therapist was impressed with the strength training and how quickly it progressed, and said that he wished people in PT would also do strength training because they worked hand in hand in getting past that injury. So
Absolutely. I've worked with quite a few PTs over the years, and I've heard that a lot, because it's the truth. Your body responds. What you need both, honestly, when you're recovering. And yeah, a lot of people just get half the coin there, and they never actually get fully better because of it.
I'm just excited that my doctor said I can't do goblet squats anymore. So.
Yeah, isn't that nice? Did you, did you bribe him? All right, Ben, we've got, do you recommend any type of stretching? So, I do. So for you guys here in the Zoom, at the end of each of your workouts, there is a stretching routine and a mobility routine related to each one, each day, and each day that you did. So there's an upper body one and a lower body one, depending on what type of exercises you did. So I do like stretching. I don't like stretching cold muscles. And what that means is I like to stretch at the end of my workouts, not at the beginning, right? So what I like in the beginning is like dynamic movements where we're kind of warming up, loosening the joint up, using the bands, doing shoulder circles, whatever, kind of like opening things up, moving them through their whole range of motion actively. And then afterwards, I like more of the static stretching where we're holding a stretch and holding the muscles in a lengthened position. The reason being because once they're warm, you can stretch them safely. If you try to stretch a cold muscle, especially if you're a fucking 40-year-old dude with some old tight ass hamstrings and you try to touch your toes with cold muscles, there's a greater likelihood that you're going to end up with a pulled hammy than doing anything good for your body. So yeah, stretch the muscles after your workouts when they're warm with the static stretching, and do like a dynamic warm up where you're actively running your joints and your muscles through their range of motion before your workouts. Chantel, I need to get a doctor note not to do any more Bulgarian split squats. I fucking feel you. Yeah, Chansey
Oh,
set a
oh,
dangerous precedent there.
wait, but the doctor still says I can do Bulgarian split squats.
Okay, yeah, because that's
So
a PT move. Yep,
it
that's a
is.
recovery
And
move.
I will say that they were quite impressed when they had me do the bridge
Yep,
and she had me do with no weight. She's like, "Oh, you do that easily." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm kind of used to doing it with a
with a
kettlebell in my
barbell on
lap
my
or a
hip, yeah,
bar."
or a
Yeah.
kettlebell. Yep, awesome. Good. Well, it'll make that easier to recover since you've got a good foundation built there. Awesome. Well, I am going to cut out of here. I will see you guys tomorrow afternoon. Have a fantastic night.